Hello, friends, and welcome to the Optimized Advisor Podcast, where we focus on optimizing the well-being and best practices of insurance and financial professionals today. On this show, our objective is to help you optimize your life, optimize your profession, and learn from other optimized advisors. I'm your host, Scott Heinila. We hope you enjoy the show. Michael Stapleton, welcome. Welcome into the studio today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to meet you in person.
Likewise.
We've been having some dialogue about your exciting adventure, and we definitely like to learn more about your story. I'm not going to spill the beans just yet.
Okay.
We'll get there. Incredibly excited. So thank you for taking time to visit with us.
Excited to be here.
It's greatly appreciated. So let me do the proper introduction for you. Michael is the CEO and co-founder of Leopard, an AI-powered business-to-business insurtech startup that helps life and annuity distributors identify revenue opportunities in their existing books of business. Prior to Leopard, Michael was VP and General Manager at Policygenius, overseeing the company's B2B offering. He spent time as a management consultant at L.E.K Consulting, and earlier in his career served in business-to-business SaaS head of marketing roles. Michael holds a BA from Reed College, an MBA from HEC Paris, and a Master's of Advancement Management from Yale. Excellent. We are in the presence of a successful entrepreneur as well as a sharp and talented human being.
Well, thank you. That's a nice introduction.
Can we talk a little, before we get into your story?
Yeah.
We were chatting last night, talking a little bit at dinner, and your world adventures I find quite intriguing and fascinating. Where you've gone to educate, where you've found yourself living. That's, I would say, outside the norm.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely moved a lot. So I went to college. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, went to college in Oregon, lived in San Francisco for 8 years after college, decided I wanted to switch paths a little bit, so I went to business school in Paris, came back to the US and went to another graduate school program in Connecticut. After that, I moved to Boston for work, where I was a management consultant, and then moved to New York about 3.5 years ago. So,
which you said you just love.
I love New York. Yeah,
Your home.
It's my favorite city. Yeah,
that's fantastic.
So I've had the privilege of paying like the highest rent in the world across the
pretty much everywhere.
Yeah,
and you've been there you were saying
3.5 years. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
That's fantastic. Good.
Yeah.
You moved there about the same time we moved from California to Texas.
Yeah.
So our completely different environments, but timing in sync.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit, going beyond your biography, tell me a little bit more about yourself, your history, and what brings you to the current venture that you're launching today.
Yeah, so Leopard's been around we're new. We've been around for 11 months. As I think you mentioned in the intro, I previously worked at Policygenius. I was there for about 2.5 years. I joined at a pretty late stage of the business on the strategy team, and then moved over to help run the B2B side of the business. And we were acquired towards the beginning of last year. I ended up not, aggressively looking around, but exploring other opportunities. An acquisition is always a good time to do that. Mm-hmm. And I met with one of the heads of the venture studio at D.E. Shaw, which is top 5 hedge fund in assets under management. And they have a data fintech focus and actually have done a lot in insurance. And he and I were talking about the macro problems in life and annuities, and the two that we really identified were just real data problems, lack of digitization and structuring of data, which causes all kinds of downstream effects, and really manual processes, sort of bizarrely manual processes. And one of the biggest areas that impacts tends to be post-sale with in-force policy management and optimization. There's there's an old saying, right, where it's much easier to sell to an existing client than find a new client.
Right.
And there's a bizarrely inefficient model in insurance, right? It's in life insurance. It's let me find a new client. I'm going to sell them a term life policy, and then I'm going to go find a new client. And that just
hunt, kill,
yeah,
hunt, kill,
right.
rinse, repeat.
Not
rinse,
a lot
repeat.
of farming. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of that is because it's so hard to know which clients represent additional revenue opportunities that are of benefit to them too, not just you're trying to squeeze money out of your client.
Right.
And so that was sort of the kernel of the idea behind Leopard. We spent a few months talking through it, vetting the idea, and then formally started the business in November of last year. And so we've been working this year really to build the core platform, work closely with design partners. I've had a great year, and are starting to really stand up the business from a commercial perspective right now and in Q1. And excited to be working with Optimized as part of that.
We are incredibly excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited about the technology and getting that rolled out. So thank you.
Yeah.
It's interesting you made the comment about the inefficiencies relating to in-force policy data and servicing existing clients. So in this journey of our conversations and rolling out Leopard, I said, I'm going to spot check a few of our top advisor relationships, ones who are really good friends of ours, been with us for many, many years, very successful advisors, right? Now, for us, most of our relationships are going to be more geared in that truly as a financial advisor or wealth manager. Yep. So what that means is typically, although they may embrace insurance, life insurance in particular, it's probably not their primary source of revenue.
Sure. Yeah.
So I just said, hey, John, David, 5 guys I called. What is your current process for monitoring, servicing, reviewing not your clients who you have never sold an insurance policy to, the ones that you actually have an insurance policy to, and in particular term? We don't have any process for that. Interesting. The data exists somewhere in our system, but we don't have any mechanism that notifies us or signals us to conduct a review, to discuss a replacement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that part of that is that's just a pain, right? I mean, the typical process you would take today is you would look at your client list, try to figure out which carriers and what coverage the various clients have, go to the carrier portal and try to figure out, get a copy of the policy and an update, request an illustration if it's a universal policy, which can take a few months. Mm-hmm. Then you get a 62-page document that has 3 pages of actually useful information, which you have to hunt for.
Yep.
Right. Read through it and then start looking at the client's personal information and saying, is there a coverage gap? If you wanted to even look at replacements, then you'd have to go find quoters that could do, quote against the existing data. That's a 45-minute to 2-hour process, depending on how in depth you're going. And if that's not truly central to your business, that's a lot of time.
That's a byproduct.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way to optimize this process.
Yeah.
And in walks Leopard.
That's the core idea.
Okay, so what's in the name? I'm fascinated.
Yeah. So this comes.
Why cheetah? Why not cheetah over leopard?
Yeah.
I'm just playing.
No, it's a totally fair question. This sort of comes back from when I was actually in marketing. I did a rebrand of a startup I worked for and worked with a really prominent naming consultant, which is actually a thing. And he said one of the things that is, there are a bunch of attributes of a brand. And people tend to focus on the literal meaning, and they think that the name is what is supposed to convey what the brand stands for. But we change associations all the time, right? Apple has nothing to do, right, with the fruit.
What the heck is a Nike?
Yeah, exactly. And Slack, right, is a slacker is someone who doesn't do work, is not productive, and we use Slack as a productivity tool. So actually, associations are not that hard to change.
Great point. The
thing you can't change easily at all is memorability. So if you can find something that sticks, you can then work on the associations with it. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote out 400 potential names. I narrowed that down to 100 because generally the rule.
Wait, hold on. How did you even come up with the 400 names?
I sat in a room for 5 hours and forced myself until I got to 400.
Wow.
And part of the reason is, there's a lot of creative rules of thumb. Like once you get past 200 or 300 is when you actually start getting creative.
Interesting. And now, did you do that truly in a vacuum, meaning you just sat down and started to write words down?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
did.
okay.
I did have some, some people in the D.E. Shaw studio threw out ideas and stuff,
Of course.
but largely, yeah, just playing with names. I threw out 300. I looked at the 100. I got the list down to 20.
Right.
And then I just did a personal choice. I like these 10 the most. And I emailed about 30 people I know, and I said, here's a list of 10 names. I'm going to email you in a week, and without referring to this email, respond with whatever you remember from this list. And Leopard was by far and away the most memorable. It had like 65% memorability rating.
Interesting. That's
And
fascinating.
and the next highest had like a 20%.
Clear winner.
Yeah, it was a clear winner. And it does, maybe fortuitously, this wasn't actually intentional, but the brand story of being able to see things that are hard to see with the human eye is really analogous to what we do. And that's leopard. The leopard is the animal's core skill, or one of them. So, that's how we landed on leopard.
That's great. I love that.
And that's why not cheetah.
Love the name.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Leopard's way better.
Yeah, I think so too. Cheetah's
I agree. It's a very cool name. Even better is the product. So let's talk about what is Leopard. How did this come to be?
How it works, or how? So I sort of told you the kernel of the idea.
The idea. Yep.
Yeah.
What we want to talk about is what the heck is Leopard?
Yeah. So Leopard, where we if you look at these two big problems, right? Poor data organization, really the existence of data, and manual processes, and in-force management being where that hits really hard. When you use Leopard, the first thing you do is add policy data to the system, which you can do in a bunch of ways. You can drop PDFs in. We have done a fair amount of AI prompting to be able to parse policy PDFs, Excel files. You can type in policies.
So hold on. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
For today, for now,
Yeah.
quickly developing, I understand, but for now, it's term life and term conversion to permanent options exist within the software. Quickly, it's going to be cash value opportunities, and then the future includes annuities.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
So I do have the ability to, and in no specific, probably reverse order, manually go in, create a file. We want to try and avoid that.
Yeah, I mean, it's there.
But it is there.
I'm not sure who has that kind of time, but it's there.
It does have the ability. The best alternative option besides a data feed would be I actually have the physical policy. I can load the policy into the system. It screens the data. Yeah,
and the other thing we do is, we're building, and we do have data feeds. We have partners that we can use for data feeds as well.
Which would be the best practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and then we have a tool called Leopard Connect, which actually connects directly to carrier portals. And ingests policy data from the portal.
Okay, so I'm a user.
Yep.
John Doe agent. I can go in and say I'm appointed with this carrier. If there's a Leopard Connect, then I can work through the process to make that connection.
Yeah, it's a Plaid-like experience. You go in and enter your credentials for that carrier portal, and it just starts pulling in the policies from that carrier.
Simple enough.
Yeah. And so once you've connected to the carriers, put the data feeds in place, whatever, you then have a centralized view of your book of business. For term, you mentioned we started with term life replacements and conversions. In the background, we immediately start quoting against the existing coverage and say, all right, so adjust for the current age of the client and start looking for alternative policies and look for policies that are less expensive with the same benefit, have a higher benefit at the same or lower cost, or extend coverage in length. And we score those and surface those and say, okay, here's the ones you could reach out to your client and offer a replacement for, and it would benefit the client, in addition to you getting to earn commission again on the same client, because life is basically all paid up front. And then we also detect conversion opportunities and surface those and monitor those and send alerts as you get closer and closer to conversion windows ending.
That's fantastic. How does the scoring work? Higher, better?
Higher,
better. And then does it have any fun kind of functionality within it where it's like green, yellow,
so there's a
red?
green. Yes, there is a green. It's supposed to be intuitive as possible. Green, the darker the green, the better. I mean, really crazy there, right?
Okay.
Darker the red, the worse.
Okay.
And actually, and there's negative scoring, which means which is actually still good. Frankly, one of the things we've heard from advisors that I was not expecting was there's really only two outcomes of this kind of analysis. One is I can reach out to the client and say, hey, great news. I reviewed your coverage and I actually think we could reduce your premium, or I think we could extend your coverage by 10 years for the same amount. Great news, right? You're showing you're looking out for the client. Or you can reach out and say, hey, great news. I've reviewed your coverage and you've got the best thing out there. And here's a grid showing it. So it creates a reason to reach out, and also shows the client that you're thinking about their needs.
From both sides of the coin. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And then the conversion window, where is it pulling that? What document is it pulling that data from? And then how does it then present that within the software?
Yeah. So right now, the policies have conversion. Either there's a writer or it's written into the document, so that detects it, and then
okay, so it pulls it from that.
Yeah,
Got it.
and then there's often some rules around, but they're not for the first 2 years, and then up into the
70.
lesser of 70 or 20 years from that time or whatever. And we use some AI and decision trees to, okay, what does that actually mean, and parse out beginning and end date of the conversion window. And it services those as opportunities. And what we're going to layer in shortly is propensity to convert, likelihood that they would actually convert to a permanent policy.
Got it. Okay. But then it's up to the advisor at that point to then go to the carrier for now, right? To then run the conversion solutions on a separate platform.
Yeah, we started pulling in quoting for GUL and IUL, and are adding whole and VUL this quarter. So you'll still be able to go generate quotes. We don't have full illustration capabilities right now, but frankly, with our early advisors, they say that it kind of overwhelms the client at that point anyway. So you can use the tool and generate a very straightforward comparison grid that shows premium and coverage through year and date, and in an Excel grid that we automate the creation of to start that conversation.
Now, within the software, how does the relationship get structured from an insurance carrier solution standpoint? So the recommendation and output subsets, is that set forth by the firm partner like ours, the IMO, based on Leopard's current capabilities, or how does that really come to fruition?
And tell me more. I'm not sure.
Well, so I have a 20-year term that I purchased in 2002 with Banner Life.
Yep.
So here we are, 2024. It's going to expire. I put it in the system. Leopard then runs all of these quotes. Well, how do I know that those are? This is the IMO, FMO saying, well, we want to make sure that the output solutions are going to be tied to actual carriers we can do business with, our agents can do business with.
Got it. Yeah. So you can filter by carrier, so that you just make sure the ones you're appointed with are showing up in the system.
Okay. So in our setup, we kind of go down a drop list and say these are all the companies we want.
Yeah. So right now we actually have to do it when you're running the quotes, but we're just adding gating, essentially is what we call it, right? So what's the appointment set?
Understand.
Yeah.
Okay. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, to this point, we really haven't talked about anything that the system is doing from an artificial intelligence AI standpoint.
We just haven't said.
Oh,
it was
okay.
AI.
Unpack that for me, please.
Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit last night too, right? We don't think of ourselves as an AI first company per se. I mean, I think there's a sort of a problem with saying, hey, we have AI, what can we do with it?
Right.
But there are ways the really critical ways we use it. And one of the reasons we think this solution is much more possible today than it has been in the past. So the policy retrieval process, for instance, where you're connecting to carrier portals and gathering policies and policy data, relies on Vision AI to navigate those portals properly and find the data.
As opposed to the previous archaic technology, OCR.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's actually the next step too, right? So you got the policy, or the previous one was sort of a fragile process automation that could break pretty easily. You've got the policy, now you want to
highly inaccurate.
Yeah, I mean, often, pretty rough.
Right.
So you've got the policy data, often in the form of PDFs, because for some reason that's the way this industry has decided to not structure data. And then we use...
What would your preferred format be?
I mean, a structured database somewhere, right?
Of course.
Yeah, which is what we end up creating in the process of this, right? So if we get all the policy data, and a lot of that comes in PDFs, then we use LLMs to actually parse out the data and create a structured database for it.
Understood.
Whereas, before you would have tried to do it with some OCR technology. Then once you get to the point of, okay, I've generated some comparative options and I've created a grid, that's where we use AI to help with some client outreach. So there is an ability to generate talking points, which is really an email or talking script that says, here's what you have. And I found a couple of other options that I think might be better for you, and here's why. And again, you can use that as a talk track or just copy it and drop it in an email. And the other thing we're doing is we're building a field underwriting module that actually looks at all of the field underwriting manuals, which again are in PDFs, and all the rules they have for conditions and prescriptions and build charts, and querying those so that the advisor can say, all right, here's what my client has. And rather than operating with really sort of strict decision trees, we can query those and figure out what eligibility is for different products based on those manuals. And that requires AI as well.
How acute does that get? So let's kind of go down the level 1 through level 4 real quick of underwriting data.
Yeah.
Date of birth, sex, height, weight, basic stuff, medications, blood pressure, cholesterol, all those basic level 1, maybe entering into maybe level 2. Then you deal with specific impairments.
Yeah.
How acute could this get with drilling into various impairment conditions or other non-health related impairments, such as flights? You know, I'm a private pilot.
Yeah, occupation.
Correct. Those types of things. What would you envision the future being in its capabilities?
So I have not seen that one that I'm a pilot, but that's an interesting one. The impairment guides, I had not encountered these much before, so I've had the pleasure of reading through about 40 of them so far.
Oh my gosh.
That is rough.
Yeah.
But they do have some things in the impairment guides that are not medical impairments. So one is, for instance, if you've been in prison.
Right.
And then they have some weird rules around, well, were you paroled in the first 6 months? Was it a misdemeanor or felony? Did this happen in the last 2, 5, or 10 years? As long as it's in that impairment guide, or
then you can classify it, quantify it. It's a metric that can be ascertained, deduced down to an output.
Yeah.
Wow,
exactly.
well, like DUI is another one.
Yeah, exactly.
Number of DUIs in a period of time frame. You can easily quantify all that data.
Yeah.
And have it spit out a result.
Yeah.
Wow, that's highly efficient.
And the good thing is,
you think about this. 30, 40 different insurance companies that operate. I mean, they're 40 plus, I understand.
Sure.
But like there's that many main players in the independent brokerage space.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. I mean, it's, if you're trying to do any of that manually right now, it's really a pain. So yes, I think that this is a great example of where AI can help the industry and certainly give a better client experience. And a lot of this stuff is not going to change, right? The fact that you had a DUI on a certain date, if you can save those records, the next interaction is easier. You're just refreshing information to update what the client is eligible for.
Can we zoom out a moment?
Yeah.
On the topic of AI, you have a background of Silicon Valley technology. You've certainly been involved, I would say, with an innovator in the insurance industry with Policygenius. You are present at many conferences. You're on panels. You're pretty involved in the industry at a high level.
Yeah.
What would you say? And I'm going to throw the word wealth tech out,
okay,
as opposed to fintech or insuretech, right? So just in the broad spectrum of things, for advisors who are wondering, how is all this going to affect me as the business owner, as the practitioner? Will it improve their abilities? Will it be a hindrance to their abilities? Is it somewhere down the middle? What's your consensus?
So when you talk, futurists tend to go to really kind of catastrophic scenarios around AI.
Right, doom and gloom.
Yeah, and I think we're going to end up seeing AI just doing a lot of mundane things, which generally is just a help. If you look at the process of distributing life and annuities, or even just financial products, right? There's a lot of rote manual form fill-outs are a great application for AI. Mm-hmm. And I don't know anyone who says, I really want to hang on to the ability to fill out forms. I mean, that person is not, that's not a real person. It's also not an all or nothing, right? So one of the things from some advisors who are resistant around needs assessments for any financial product. They say you really need the person to do that. Fine. I would argue that you probably need the advisor for the last mile. So if you use AI to cover the first 70 to 80%, that's a lot of work off your plate.
Right.
And
That's a lot of the discovery, the fact finding, the administrative part, more of the mundane part of it.
Right.
It's the last 20 or 30%.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of all or nothing thinking with AI, and I think you're going to see a lot of the more mundane stuff be taken out of core processes. I do think that there's also some very generic recommendations that AI can make, and I don't think that's going to replace the advisor at all. I think if the recommendation is that generic, it's going to take an advisor 10 seconds anyway to make it. So why not have a machine make it?
Yeah. So the way I conclude that is, one, this is going to allow me to be highly more efficient as an advisor, as an agent, because AI is going to help accelerate.
Yeah.
That sales transaction. I hate using those words, but
yeah. And even in economics, there's the concept of complementary demand, right? And so if two things are complementary, and in this case, if you have AI and the demand for AI goes up, complementary skill sets would be things like strategic thinking and creativity. That's just going to be what advisors end up spending more time on, and relationship building, which are the things that they tend to want to spend time on anyway.
Absolutely.
Right, in their higher value activities. So I think this will help. I'm not a doom and gloomer on AI at all.
That's fantastic. And the other part of it, you and I touched on a little bit last night. It's like, well, God forbid, I actually get a little bit of me time back and do the things that I would like to do, as opposed to being stuck in the mud.
Yeah. Well, and let's even assume that you're not even focused on me time. Do you really not have a backlog of work? I have so many things I need to get done.
The list keeps growing, and not shortening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's a great point.
If I were to use AI to streamline a lot of the stuff I do, I would still have a ton to do. So I just don't. And obviously that changes from job to job, but
if AI
advisors have a lot to do. Yeah.
100%. If AI could help me eliminate a third of my to-do list, that's a really good thing.
Then I'll pull from a third of my backlog of things I need to do.
That's right.
Right.
Very, very well said.
Yeah.
I appreciate that take. Okay. What's the future of Leopard? What would you say the future should look like? What's the big, bold vision when you grow up?
Yeah, so long term, we believe that one of the things that's missing is a way of streamlining the industry with a kind of data and automation layer that connects all stakeholders and makes the flow of information and transactions much easier. So in the sort of longer future, there is a Leopard ecosystem of different apps and modules that support different parts of the life and annuities distribution process. And we'll build a lot of those. We'll partner with people to have third-party apps on the platform too. They'll be adoptable in a modular way and very flexible, but it's sort of how do we look at all of these things we do to get life insurance in the hands of the right person and review that coverage, obviously long term, and streamline and automate that. So you should end up seeing costs go down and revenue per client go significantly up because of this.
So unpack that a little bit and explain for the audience how that would actually work.
Sure. So one of the things, if you look at the way, we alluded to this, if you look at the way brokers currently interact with carriers, a lot of it is I'm appointed with 20 carriers, which means I have 20 usernames and passwords for 20 different carrier portals. So I manually go into each of them, and then I have to do business their way, and which is maybe 60% the same across all carriers, but the 40%, that's a lot of difference if it's 40% different for each carrier.
Right.
And so if we can create a more unified experience where you sort of connect to all carriers instantly, the data around the coverage that you've placed across those carriers is in one place. It's easy to analyze the data, and it's easier to do business with them because you're connected to all of them at once. You can apply, you can service your book of business. I mean, there needs to be a button on a policy page that says request in-force illustration.
Right.
I am astounded at the number of times I meet senior people in this industry that say it takes them 90 minutes on the phone every time they need to request an in-force illustration. That can't be good.
Right.
And a lot of that is because there's not a kind of standardized intermediary way of working across carriers throughout the life cycle.
Great point. And in some cases, you're waiting 3 to 5 or 10 business days to actually generate the invoice illustration.
Yeah.
That is not okay.
Yeah.
Then on the annuity side, to your point, using the button, I should be able to either as the advisor and or the policyholder go in, click a button and say, I would like funds.
Yeah.
How do I want to receive funds?
Yeah.
What funds are available free of any surrenders?
Yeah.
If I have an income rider, what's the current stated income rider value? Those things should exist.
Yeah, it's weird when, when I talk to carriers and they say that the difficulties with in-force illustrations, for instance, is, they say it can take some time to calculate a lot of the data. And my thought is, why? Is it not live somewhere in some database?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, we want to help carriers too longer term. This is not just a distributor thing. You need to help both sides if you're going to create this large ecosystem. And so that's right. You should be able to.
That's a win-win.
Yeah.
It's like we're coming from the technology side of things. We're building infrastructure that'll help all tides rise together, ultimately in the face of who? The consumer,
right.
Providing better, more efficient value to the consumer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of amazing when consumers are not getting the best value in this industry yet. And that never lasts forever, right? The industry's assuming they're not fully owned in an oligopoly or something.
Right.
The consumer ends up winning in a free market. And it's amazing when I talk to pretty sophisticated consumers and they say, what do you mean you could replace my policy with something better? I'm not younger and healthier than I was before.
Right.
And in 30 to 40% of the cases, you can.
You can.
And it's just because it's not yet a fully efficient market.
The other tool that I like, and then I want to go into another question, is within Leopard one of the features that I really enjoyed was, okay, my current existing policy is I was issued at preferred non-tobacco, super preferred non-tobacco. Yes, it'll automatically generate equal rate class, but with the click of a button, you can see standard. So you can vary the risk class, and it spits out the result right then and there.
Yeah, it shows. So if you if you pull a few policies that you want to put into a comparison grid, we automatically run quotes for the health classes above and below whatever is on the existing policy, so that you can navigate that conversation too. And generally it helps start that conversation. So yeah, I mean, because we know that things might have changed.
Right, that's fantastic. Okay, I want to. It's interesting because in my experience, with the exception of a multi-generational family or business that took over the practice from the father, people don't just choose elect to go into the insurance business. You found Policygenius, they found you. And more to my question is, I don't know the answer to that, so elaborate on that. But when did the light bulb go off where you were inside the Policygenius ecosystem, was where I would imagine kind of the brainchild of, there's got to be a better way, and the idea of Leopard was born. How did that all, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, so when I joined Policygenius, I joined from being a management consultant, and I was not particularly interested in insurance. I liked this. I wanted to go in-house and continue to do strategy work. The founders of Policygenius came from McKinsey. My boss also had been a management consultant, the head of strategy and ops. And the company was at a healthy size, 500 employees, and sort of late stage. So the things I wanted were all there, and I liked. I'd done mostly B2B in my career, and I liked that it was a D2C business, but that the process of buying insurance is a lot like a B2B purchase in many ways, right? It's heavily considered.
Right.
If the main difference between D2C and B2B is the complexity of the purchase, insurance is pretty complex. You're going to ask your wife, your husband, talk a while about it and make a decision. So I ended up liking insurance, just by being there and thinking about all the problems. And I think the thing that drives me most as an entrepreneur is a lot of things don't work the way they should, as we were just talking about, and that just annoys me.
Right. Now I want to fix it.
Yeah,
I'm going to solve this problem.
This can't possibly be the way this should be done.
The game is on.
Yeah, and being in Policygenius made it. We did things, I think, a lot better than a lot of people are able to operate in the industry, and there was still an incredible number of problems. And one of the things we certainly saw was there's not a regular revisiting of coverage in any kind of systematic way. And so that idea and the data challenges were constant themes in conversations I was having at Policygenius, especially on the B2B side when I started working more there. So when I met with the D.E. Shaw Venture Studio and we started talking, we sort of both, we started talking and the conversation came together quickly. You know, the person I met said, there's just not structured data. And I said, yeah, and a lot of manual processes. And this really hurts with in-force business in particular. And so the core of the idea came together in a conversation.
Have you found that insurance companies, based on your conversations and in what it is you're trying to do, are they accepting to it? Are they motivated?
The carriers?
Yeah, at this point, or is there resistance? What are you finding the kind of the?
Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of resistance.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Frankly,
actually.
less than I thought I would see.
Good.
One thing we a little bit concerned about as well. You know, technically this product can help with replacements. Obviously, it's designed to help with upsells, cross-sells, et cetera. And we have not gotten a lot of concern from carriers. We get a kind of a weird question, which is from carriers. They'll say, "Are carriers concerned about this?" And I'm like, "Well, you tell me. You're the carrier. I don't." And I think that what they really know too is that you could make that argument against brokerages in general. You know, comparing products.
Right,
so,
right.
and you know, this could actually grow the pie, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And
it's
then
a close club, right?
Yeah.
The insurance world is a tight-knit club. And so it's like, who's the one that's willing to put their neck out there?
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we're kind of all herding along in the most part. And so there's a lot of that.
Yeah, and the other part is on the, you know, where we want to get to, where you can be on a policy page and click request to enforce illustration. I've spoken to a lot of carriers in the past few weeks even, and asked them, are there processes that are intentionally slow? You know, that you're somehow incentivized to slow roll this, and maybe a little bit on the enforce illustration part, but certainly for things like check policy status, change beneficiary, they say no, we're slow because we're an old company,
right?
Or insurance, we're middle-aged, which means we've only been around for 120 years.
I mean, I would think anybody would love to automate that.
Yeah.
The issue becomes from insurance companies. Well, that's a 7-figure project for us to onboard that, and that gets added to the list.
Yeah, but a lot of, obviously insurance companies are very cost-cutting oriented in many cases, and so they see a lot of that as a big advantage.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, with the last few minutes we have here, you're busy. You're hard charging, growing a business. I like to always ask, what are some of the best practices you can share with how you manage your time, both professionally as well as personally? What is your process? How do you go about to squeeze every ounce of juice out of the day?
Yeah, I probably don't have profound thoughts here, but I'll share the ones that you probably heard elsewhere that I adhere to. I do believe in starting my day with morning stand-ups, very quick, kind of what's everyone doing, and resolve any administrative blockers. I'm a pretty intense GTDer, which became popular 25 years ago. But understanding that
explain that to the audience.
So GTD, right? David Allen wrote this book, Getting Things Done. I think in the late 90s, maybe the early 2000s, about how you really want to literally take every input that comes your way and process it and organize it in by project and context, so that you really don't miss things, and you can actually, by working in context, get more done more quickly, and always focus on what's the next action. So I follow that practice pretty rigorously.
Okay.
And then I do, I do believe that physical health and productivity, mental well-being go hand in hand. So I try to work out pretty consistently and force myself to do that.
That's kind of an element of the EOS, right? It's like identify, discuss, resolve.
That's right, yeah.
And then the ultimate goal is action item.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually something I try to be a little bit careful about, because I'm very action-oriented.
Right.
And I get a little bit uncomfortable when we spend a lot of time talking about stuff and not driving towards an outcome and action. Sometimes I need to be a little bit more patient about that, because my natural, great, got it. Yeah, what are we doing about it?
You and I are the same. The most basic way I can explain that is if I go to a restaurant and I look at the menu.
Yeah.
Within a minute or less, I've already decided what I'm going to have.
Yeah.
And it's like, I see what I want.
Yeah.
Well, what about if you find this other item over here that you like? No, I've already made up my decision.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah. So not lingering in the indecisive state.
No.
Yeah.
But is it perfect? No. I take that it's better than the latter.
Yeah, that's sort of because there's a trade-off for all kinds of practices. The other thing I'll say that I have tried to be pretty deliberate about, especially at this stage of the business, is every founder I've spoken with and worked for says, you're going to think your business is going to fail at some point, and you're going to have really highs and really lows. And expecting that has been helpful. And every day I say, well, yeah, I mean, if I feel that way today, that's part of the process. And so I don't add extra I try not to add extra anxiety on top of anxiety by worrying about the fact that I'm feeling, anxious or something.
You try to maintain a proper glucose level.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So sort of that mindset.
Easier said than done.
Absolutely. Yeah. But, our natural inclination is to say, I feel like things aren't going to work out, and then stress out about that. And so I try to take an attitude more of, today I feel like things aren't going to work out. Yeah, I guess I'm supposed to feel that way as an early stage startup.
That's exactly right.
So you're right. Absolutely easier said than done, but still something
It starts with recognition and talking about it. Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming in today. This was fantastic. It was very insightful.
Thank you. That was great.
We can say that launch with Optimized Insurance Planning and Leopard is imminent.
It is.
It's right around the corner.
Yeah, should be a few weeks away.
To that end, I will say that we are acting expeditiously to hire a dedicated sales associate whose sole responsibility is going to be for life and long-term care sales. And I feel that Leopard is going to be a core driver in that opportunity.
I hope so, yeah. Can't wait to meet that person.
I don't know how it won't work.
Yeah, I don't either. But let's hope we're both right.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Please subscribe, like, share, leave a comment or review. Be sure to check us out on social media at Optimized Advisor Podcast. Till next time.